Okay, you guys, we want to make sure we simply clarify exactly how important it is to convey information correctly in economics, and we do that through models, specifically graphs. The first graph we have looked at is a change in quantity demanded. I remind you of your intro to demand assignment, started with this whole idea of why consumers, ceteris paribus, will buy more or less of anything. So for this to work out, to graph correctly, we always grab a specific good and service, and that is our title. That is it. The vertical axis will always be the price axis, and the horizontal axis will always be the quantity axis. From there, it's just a question of grabbing a demand curve. And I remind you, the law of demand says there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. What does that mean? That means when the price is going up, the quantity demanded will decrease. When the price is decreasing, the quantity demanded will increase. What we really want to think about always is appropriately labeling everything, because I remind you, I'm communicating information. As such, I'll always label this as the demand curve. Now, what is the quantity demanded? That is a particular amount of quantity at a particular price, meaning that is a point on the curve. And since a point on the curve, from your years of mathematics, you guys recognize that that means that there are coordinates involved. So what we do is we use dashed lines to convey where that point would go down in theory to each one of the particular axes. Now, one more time, it is the price that determines this particular quantity. So what happened if, for example, the price was to decrease, meaning it moved this direction that I'll call P sub 2? Well, according to the demand curve, at this particular price, P sub 2, there is its own particular quantity that is being demanded. And notice that, of course, it is more. Why is it more? Well, you guys know that. Ceteris paribus, you will buy more of a good or service if the price of that good or service goes down. So at that point, I recognize, oh, I have another point. So what I want to do is just draw some new dashed lines that reach out horizontally and reach out vertically to from this point to each one of the axes to communicate in theory what those values would be. Notice I have a single demand curve the entire time. When a price moves, you are moving along a stable demand curve. Now, I have no idea if I went from this top point, which I'm just going to call A, or the bottom point, which I'll just call B. In that case, you can use whatever notation it is that you would like. Hold on one second. Apparently, I'm having little issues here. There we go. So how about I move? It doesn't matter, once again, which one's A, which one's B. That's not really important to us. So the question is, am I moving from A to B or B to A? Because those are clearly two different things. That is the value of this symbol right here. This arrow that we tend to draw on the graphs communicates to whoever is taking a look at the graph exactly what it is that you're trying to say. And we're trying to say that we are moving from A to B. So what is this? This is a change in quantity demanded. As I go from A, Q sub 1, to B, which has Q sub 2, clearly the quantity has increased. So what can I state? I can state that this graph shows an increase in quantity being demanded. What is the reason? Reason is always due to price. The reason is that the price went, well, let's take a look. If I go from A to B, that means I'm going from P sub 1 to P sub 2. So in this case, the price decreased. That is the only reason that we would ever move along a particular demand curve. That is a perfect graph of an increase in the quantity demanded. So what would a decrease in the quantity demanded look like? Well, in that case, let's see if I can save us some time here. All right. I am just going to copy this whole thing, move it right over there, and all that is that instead of moving from A to B, I'm going to be moving from B to A. So I just need to switch this arrow around a little to convey that. So what am I showing here? Well, let's grab this. There it is. So this graph is showing not an increase, but a decrease in quantity demanded. How do I know that? Because B is at Q sub 2. It's moving to A, which is at Q sub 1. So I'm moving to the left. Now, why would consumers buy less of a good or service, ceteris paribus? That is because the price has gone up. So I'm going to make that change right there. And what you see are the only two possible graphs to show when you would like to convey a change in quantity demanded. And this and that are the only two possible reasons for us to do that. So what do we remember? We remember that quantity demanded is not the same thing as demand. So now let's take a look at a change in demand, and we're going to also bring into place those explanations. So demand, well, that is the entire curve. So let me start with initial demand curve. Once again, my price and my axes. And remember, the reason I am not putting values here is because a quantity that is being demanded is at a particular price. The demand curve represents all possible prices, which is conveyed just moving along the axis. So we have going to actually have an actual change in demand. And let's say in this case, we're going to show a demand increase. That means that this particular demand curve has moved to the right. At all possible prices, there we are, that quantity now has moved to that quantity. At all possible prices, the quantity that is demanded has increased. So now we're talking about two separate demand curves. It has nothing to do with an individual point. So let's eliminate that. Also, we have no need, since there's no points, for any dashed lines. Let's eliminate that. We definitely do need this, though. This always helps us convey where the movement is. So what do I see? I see a perfectly labeled graph of an increase in demand. Remember, demand is not the same as quantity demanded. What is the reason? Because this one is very clean. The only reason is price. Well, ladies and gentlemen, price describes moving along a stable curve, not movement of the entire curve. Those are what we call the 5 determinants of demand. What are they? Well, this is when you have to make sure you take notes in class. Consumer expectations will move demand curves. Consumer tastes will move demand curve. Consumer income changes, specifically to normal and inferior goods, will move demand curves. Number of buyers will move demand curves. Prices of related goods, specifically complementary goods and substitute goods, will move demand curves. There are 5 different explanations for a demand curve, the entire curve to shift. This would be an increase in demand. What would a decrease in demand look like? Well, let's just copy this on over right here, and let's make some subtle changes. Number 1, let us say the initial demand curve was now at, let's say D sub 1 was here. A decrease simply means you're moving to the left. All I really need to do is just convey that by making sure my arrow between the 2 curves itself is to the left. On this one, D sub 1 increased to D sub 2. Over here, D sub 1 decreased to D sub 2. So this would model a decrease in demand. Now, what are the reasons? Well, in this case, the reasons still have to come from one of the 5 determinants of demand. Consumer expectations, consumer tastes, consumer income, normal and inferior goods, number of buyers, prices of related goods, which means we're talking about complementary and substitutable goods. And that right there is what I am looking for in our assignments, which have to do with graphing demand. There's the top 2 graphs must look something like this, or graphing quantity demanded, which means the bottom 2 graphs must look something like that. So please make sure you reference this if necessary for help. And I remind you, there is no substitute, quite honestly, for making sure you are in class every day, you are taking notes, and more importantly, you're actually studying what we're talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, other than that, have yourselves a great day, and hopefully this was helpful for you.